everyone. Good afternoon, America, and all of you who may be listening not only here in the great country of America, but also throughout the world. Today is February 14th, the year 2022. The new WCEG Network welcomes you. This program is Issues and Answers, and I am your host, Norman A. Carter Jr. Now, for those of you who don't know, on your computer or smartphone, you can view or hear us by typing in WCEG talkradio.com, and in your browser, hit enter, and on the next screen, click the live stream tab. On your smart TV, and I do this myself, just click the YouTube icon and search for the WCEG network, and then look for Issues and Answers. Program looks great on TV, absolutely. WCEG, what does that stand for? It stands for Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. Our programming goal is to leave you more informed and more empowered than you were before you tuned in. If we're not doing that, please let us know. Our motto is we speak life into the community. You may like us on Facebook and view us live. Follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Now, the topics and opinions on Issues and Answers are those of me, Norman A. Carter Jr., and not my guest, and definitely not the WCEG Network. So leave my boss alone. This is my show. These are my words and the words of my guest. And folks, this is a special program I am so excited about. Really, this is the third in a series of programs that we're presenting to you on prison reform and accountability in corrections. And this is going to be a little bit different because we have various legislators who will be joining us, and they will be popping in and out, and probably more in than out a little bit later on. They're in a session now where they are voting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to introduce some people who are not even here so that as they come in, you'll know who they are. Firstly, State Representative Bruce Rogers, who's with us right now. State Representative Rogers represents District 61 in the Georgia House of Representatives. His district includes parts of South Fulton County, which includes parts of the city of South Fulton, North Atlanta, Douglas County, and Cobb County. He was first elected in 2002 and began serving in January 2003 and has been reelected every 2 years since then. During this time in office, Representative Bruce has focused on issues related to children with special needs, education, aging, working families, economic development, voting rights, and criminal justice. He has served on the Insurance, Education, Motor Vehicles, MARTOC, and Intergovernmental Coordination Committees. He currently serves on the Judiciary, Game Fish and Parks, Small Business, and Job Development, and Human Relations and Aging Committees. Also, welcome, Senator, Representative. Also, we have Representative Sandra Scott joining us. She entered the world of politics in 2008 as a member of the Clayton County Board of Education. She ran for state representative of House District 76 in 2010, where she still serves. She represents North Henry precincts, which includes Ellenwood, Lighthouse, Shakerag, Swan Lake, and in Clayton, she represents Conley, Rex, Ellenwood, Morrow, and Lake City. A little background, she joined the U.S. Army in 1984 and served at many locations throughout the world. She currently serves as a member of the following committees: Defense and Veterans Affairs, Human Relations and Aging, Science and Technology, legislative, congressional reapportionment, and special rules. State Representative Sandra Scott has introduced House Bills 962 and 971, which require gun owners to store their firearms in a secure manner and report if the firearm has been lost or stolen. Yes. In addition, and most importantly for today, State Representative Scott is co-sponsor of the Georgia House Bill 1137, which is known as the Prison Reform and Accountability in Corrections Act. Welcome, State Representative Scott. We will also have coming with us, hopefully shortly, is State Representative Rebecca Mitchell. She represents District 106. She was elected to office in 2021. She earned a bachelor's degree in orgasmic and evolutionary biology at Harvard University in 2003 and a PhD in epidemiology. Woo, got that down. And a DVM from Cornell University. Her career experience includes working as a postdoctoral researcher and as a visiting assistant professor. She is sponsoring a bill on prison employee training, which she will explain to us. And we have also with us some guests that if you have been listening to us frequently, that you have seen with us before. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Kate Boccia. She is President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Incarceration Association. She has a lifelong commitment to public service. Her journey with mass incarceration and quest to improve the treatment of those incarcerated began after the death of her son Daniel in August of 2021. He was a heroin addict with serious behavior problems. She now spends all her time waging strategic battles for families who are losing their loved ones to mass incarceration and addiction. And also back with us is Mr. Jose Morales. Mr. Morales is a retired Georgia prison warden with over 20 years of working in various capacities within the correction system. In addition, in 1999, he retired after 23 years of service in the U.S. Army Airborne Infantry. He earned a bachelor's degree in criminal justice from Columbus State University, and he is presently an activist for prison reform. And if I stumbled there a little bit, it's because I have a tendency to continually say corrections. And I was corrected about that because I understand that the word corrections no longer exists when it comes to prison systems. I learned that during our last section. So welcome all of you. We also may have coming to us Senator Sally Harrell, who sits on the State Institutions and Property Committee of the Georgia State Senate. For the past 2 months, Senator Harrell has been in contact with me. She has expressed intense interest in prison reform and Accountability Corrections Act. In fact, she requested and received copies of prior programs on issues and answers broadcasts on this topic. And at present, as with many of our state representatives, she is in a committee meeting, but may be joining us later in the program. Welcome, welcome, welcome to all of you. We appreciate you here to discuss this very important topic. I just want to begin with a little background. This is the third in a series of programs on the topic of prison reform and accountability. Originally, only one program was scheduled. The response to this topic has been tremendous. I have had more contacts via social media, email, and letters to WCEG on this subject than I have had on any subject I have dealt with on this worldwide community empowerment group. This includes programs on voting rights, police accountability, or mental health. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I received an inquiry from a media person in New York City requesting a copy of today's program. The care of persons housed in our prison systems is nationwide. Georgia is on the verge of passing prison reform legislation that may become a template for prison systems throughout this country. That is why this is important. Among the contacts I have received have been family members of persons incarcerated and incarcerated persons themselves. Among the most serious concerns are food quality, facility safety, facility cleanliness, murders, suicide, health care, including mental health counseling, rehabilitation programs, and staffing. Not one of the scores of comments and questions concerned the length of their prison sentence. All of their comments dealt with the desire to be treated humanely during their time of incarceration. That is profound and should alert us to the seriousness and sincerity of their concerns. As I had stated on my last broadcast, I do not want to be an alarmist, but I do not want Georgia to have anything similar to what happened to Attica Prison in New York of 1971. During that time, prisoners' requests for humane treatment and safety were ignored. We cannot allow that to happen here. That is why this former police officer, moi, and public safety advocate is serious about speaking with community activists and political leaders to improve conditions within our correction systems. Remember, most incarcerated people return to society. Our concerns should be both punishment and rehabilitative efforts to give them opportunities to become productive members of society. That is how we show our humanity. With that, I welcome our esteemed panel guest. And I would like to start, if I may, with State Representative Scott. Are you with us, Representative Scott?
Yes, I'm with you.
Yes, as I mentioned to you, to our audience earlier, that you are a co-sponsor of the Prison Reform and Accountability in Corrections Act. Can you give us an overview of what that's about?
Okay. Good afternoon to you all. The Prison Accountability Act, what it basically touches on is ways to improve the prison system. As you all know, that people are incarcerated. It talks about the conditions of the jails. It talks about the accountability. Because right now we have no accountability in these jails. We have none whatsoever. So it will going to allow for the jails to start being held accountable for what goes on. They're going to have to take better notes and better data, and they will have to turn the data in monthly to the speaker, to the governor, and so that we can see what is going on in these jails, because right now we have no accountability whatsoever, even down to the medication, the confinement, solitary confinement. It addresses all those issues within that bill. It addresses a variety of prison reform as well as mental health issues, all wrapped up into that one piece of legislation. Talking about the mental health, how they're going to have to start reporting the mental health cases and all of that. So it just ties all of it into one big bill, looping everything together, so that hopefully we'll be able to get a hold on these jails, and hopefully people will start being treated like they are people and not animals inside of these jails when they are held to held to some type of standards, because right now they don't have any.
Okay. State Representative Roger Bruce, what is your take on this prison accountability reform?
I agree with what she's saying. You know, we have to hold these. You hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you.
Yeah, we have to hold. Okay, yeah, we have to hold them accountable. And this is just a methodology to do that. There's not much more I can add to that. What she said is totally accurate. You know, there's no accountability at this particular point in time, and this legislation will help get us there.
Fantastic. Thank you. As we're going to move along, I see Representative Schofield is coming through with us, but I'd like to jump to Miss Boccia for a minute. If you could, I don't know whether you're familiar with everyone on the panel, but if you could explain how you, for our listeners, again, how you became an activist on this issue.
Terrific. And I do know all these champions in my for our cause that are on the panel. So again, my name's Kate Boccia. I started this journey when my son went to prison in 2012. And I learned what, all of you are learning now, the truth about the prison system. And we started the nonprofit to help families navigate the criminal legal system and better advocate for their loved ones with a mission of, helping them with positive outcomes, usually pushing innovation. But again, the House Bill 1137 is critical. And I was really excited when Representative Schofield brought that to our attention. And we want to support that and push that legislation to, there's no other institution in our country that has a lack of accountability like the prison system. So it's really important. And thank you all for championing that for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And Mr. Jose Morales, who has actually experience in the system, and he gave us a great account of what he's experienced and the challenges he has experienced working in the system. And I'd just like to, Mr. Morales, if you can give us another overview for our listeners who perhaps didn't hear you before about how you came to be an activist and a little bit about your career.
Sure. My name's Jose Morales. I spent over 22 years in the prison system, and I wanted to make a difference. After I joined the Army and got out, I worked my way up through the ranks, correctional officer, sergeant, lieutenant, major, assistant superintendent, deputy warden, and then finally warden. And my last tour was at the HIMAX, or the Special Management Unit. My brother was incarcerated for over 30 years. And so I know what it's like to be a family member. And I always wanted to keep in contact with the warden or the counselors to see the progress of my brother, make sure that my brother was safe and was being taken care of. And then when I started to see some of the things that were going on in the Georgia Department of Corrections, I felt a need to say something. I understand the conditions of confinement. I've seen them at their worst. When we talk about oversight, there is an entity, an agency, they're called the Board of Corrections. And these board members sometimes may have experience in the prison system, and then some of them might just have political. So there's really no oversight over the prison system administration. So if something goes wrong, there's no one that's going to be held accountable. 10 years ago, for every homicide, we had to explain how it happened, why it happened. But today, that's no longer a requirement, where someone has to be held accountable, and HB 1137 will do that. It will put someone, a group of individuals, to supervise what's going on in today's prisons. And I can tell you that in the last 10 years, they have gotten worse. And if we continue to put the wrong individuals responsible for 1,200 inmates and a staff of 369, then you're bound to go south. You have to know how to run a prison, the day-to-day operations, in order to make it safe. And appointing inexperienced individuals is not going to make it any better.
Very good. I think we got deep into that. We're going to revisit that. I'd next like to welcome State Representative Mitchell. Representative Schofield, I'll get to you shortly. Representative Mitchell has introduced. I gave your bio earlier as much as I could, but your interest has something to do with employee trading. Is that correct?
No, so actually, the bills that I have looked at, oops, and I think my computer just froze. Is it still working?
Yes.
So I introduced two bills, and they're actually paired bills. So they are looking at, I come from a data background. And when we look at prisons, we talk about how much labor happens in Georgia prisons. So when I came into the State House, one of my objectives was to understand what labor is happening in Georgia prisons and where and how much. And if you try to get that data right now, it is extremely opaque, both because we have multiple different systems in which folks are working, and because we have some things that are not necessarily directly classified as labor, but are indeed work. So one of the bills I introduced is asking for our state prison system to be able to quantify how much and what types of labor are happening, and to make a forward-facing dashboard so that we don't need our system to know how much labor is happening in Georgia prisons and keep that information to itself, right? We really need that information to be public for us to understand the impact of prison labor on decisions about Georgia prisons. So one of these bills asks for labor to be tracked and it to be in a forward-facing dashboard, so folks can see actually how much work is being done and what kinds of work in Georgia prisons. And that gives us the ability to actually start asking questions of how much money is being made by folks working in Georgia by the state of Georgia for folks working in prisons, because the way the system is set up now, often you see labor happening through one of the programs in the prisons, and then you never see the transfer of money because it happens within the system, right? If I make mattresses and the mattresses get here, I don't have a documentation of how much money was made by the system because they didn't pay directly for that. So that's one of the bills. And then the second bill is really simple. If people are working, they get paid. Full stop.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
If people are working, they get paid. So, there's a lot of space after that statement to say, well, how would that happen and what the system would look like? But it's simple, right? If we truly believe we do not have folks working unpaid in the US, that applies to everyone, right? Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude is the 13th Amendment. The clause after that is except as punishment for a crime. So in Georgia, we can make the decision that we are not using people's labor for free at all.
Fantastic. Which that's sort of touched on an issue we brought up on our last program with the former Warden Morales. Next, I'd like to introduce a person to me that has been so important. I learned about her from Ms. Demita Chapman, who has a program called Taking a Stand on this network, WCEG, and that's Representative Kim Schofield, who is another one of the spearheads for this Prison Reform and Accountability in Corrections Act. Representative Schofield, are you with us right now? I hear silent, so I may have to come back.
Yes, she's here.
Okay.
Here. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, I had some technical difficulties.
Not a problem,
Get off
Representative.
them. We're just getting out of session.
Okay.
And thank you for this amazing team. And, I always talk about teamwork makes the dream work, but it's not just that, it's the actions and the stories of one that produce things that are
No, you're
there
good.
we go, that produce actions. We can't continue to allow Georgia not to be held accountable. So when I first met Kate and I started hearing the number of stories and the impact of just basic human needs being destroyed, I understand why people are there, but people do not deserve the treatment that they were given. And at first you hear in disbelief, but then the anger and then the audacity starts setting in that you would treat fellow people and their families, because this is not just a issue that affects people that are incarcerated, but this impacts their families. And Georgia, we have to do better. So these bills are designed to have a model which I call OATH: oversight, accountability, transparency, and honesty. And if we don't have that, then why are we writing legislation? All legislation has to be filtered through the oath that we took to serve our people. And so, Kate's story and the stories of those that are even working in these correction facilities that are trying to do good, that don't have a voice, that have to watch the injustices and the suffering. It's egregious, it's deplorable, and it's disgusting. And so, go ahead.
No, I was going to say what I'm hearing, and that's from everyone on this panel, is that this whole thing of prison accountability, it's not only about just looking at one particular individual, it's looking at the entire system. And we've talked about this before, about there's the budgetary concerns as well as the concerns for the humanity that's involved. It's an all-encompassing thing, and it seems as though it's a system that's just been run amok
all the time for so long. Yeah, for decades. And why is it that they think they can get away with this? That's what I don't understand. What gives you the right to think? And I guess the basic premise is, we control the power of the pen, the legislation, and we control the money. Well, you know what? Enough is enough. Enough is enough. We're going to have to work really hard, and the advocates have really spoken up to get this bill moving and to get some legislation that is going to hold people accountable. The advocates have done a great job in moving this forward. And together, we're going to move this legislation to not as just a crumbs. We're going to do a little bit, but we're going to get the recipe in the loaf to start holding these people accountable. I don't want the crumbs anymore. I see Mr. Morales shaking his head. It's time we get the recipe. Don't even give me the loaf.
Amen.
Yeah, the one thing we got from Mr. Morales, and anyone anyone can jump in here. We only have about an hour, so anyone can jump in here at any time.
I apologize. I keep going in and out.
Not a problem.
We're over here at the Capitol, and we got bad reception.
I can tell. Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I apologize. I keep going in and out. Have we talked about all of the bills you want to talk about? Because there's one that I have a particular interest in, and I don't know if we're there yet.
No, come on with it.
Okay, because it deals with getting rid of the death penalty, and the death penalty is pretty final. If you are convicted of something and you get the death penalty, and they implement it, and then they find out after the fact that you didn't do it, that's a problem. They sure can't go get you and bring you back. So there is a bill, House Bill 485, that is, the idea behind it is to get rid of the death penalty, and that anybody that's on death row, their sentences would be commuted to life imprisonment without parole.
I think we had an incident, for those of you who might be unaware, and it could be Texas, I could be wrong, but it was somewhere in the Midwest where it was last year, it was found that someone who was put to death was actually innocent. They found out through DNA and some other evidence that the person was actually innocent. And we have had recently people rescued off of death row who were found to be innocent. I think it's by the Innocence Project, where these
Right.
people did in-depth investigations, and that's a horrible thing because you don't get a do-over
No,
with that.
we had several years ago, there was a state rep who was pushing for mandatory death penalty for anyone convicted of child molestation. And now none of us, approve a child being molested, but we do know that stepdads get accused of that all the time. And somebody's angry, about, mom and dad splitting up, and you get all of that kind of stuff. But anyway, this representative was pushing it hard. And about 2 weeks before the vote, her son was convicted of child molestation. And she resigned. We didn't hear from her anymore. But we don't need the death penalty. That is too final, and there's too many opportunities for a mistake to be made. So anyway, I just wanted to get that one out.
That's a good point. We hadn't had that brought out before. One thing I would like to, and this is for anyone in the panel, I personally had seen, and I said this earlier, tremendous response to this topic from our listeners and viewers. And what I would like to know, particularly from those of you who are in the legislature, have you seen an increase in concern about this issue and support? And anyone can chime in on that.
Concerned about the issue of the death penalty?
No, the death penalty, the Prison Reform and Accountability and Corrections Act.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Are you developing bipartisan support for these, and even Ms. Mitchell, some of the budgetary concerns that you have?
So I'll speak to this first part. So they took the bill from us, so I don't know that it's a bipartisan support. I want to be real clear that they hijacked the bill that we've been working on. But again, I know that's because of the pressure and all of the work that the advocates have done. And so they came and took that bill from me, put their name on it so that they can get the bill passed. Now, part of me says it's a game because they want to appear that they're doing something. And it looks like bipartisan support. And they look like, we're going to move it. But when they're going to try to kill it in the Senate. But I have a senator that I'm working with now that really wants to see this bill go someplace. So I really think it's an optics more than it really is a sincerity. But I'm not letting them get away with it just being optics. Representative Josh McCloring and I have another comprehensive bill that's going to really address some details on the things that have been looming over for a long time and close some gaps. If the truth to me is if they give me a hearing on that bill, then I know that they're serious about making some reform.
Yeah, yes, Ms. Boccia, please.
Well, I was just thinking, Representative Schofield said enough is enough. And I think the families are at a place now where we're getting stronger. We understand that the only way to change this thing is through politics. And we need to become strong enough that the legislators cannot safely ignore us, which is what they've been able to do for all these decades. They can, hi, Kay, I feel so sorry for you and your son. And, what can I do to help you? That's just coddling me and making me feel like they heard me, when in reality they can walk away and not talk about the issue. So we just need to get more organized and stronger and support these bills. There's a lot of stuff right now that the NIA supports, Southern Center for Human Rights supports. There's some things that we oppose, a lot of things we're monitoring, but these bills that Representative Mitchell and Representative Schofield and others are the death penalty. These are critical, and our families are listening now, and they're getting more educated. And that's the key to your successes. And to make this bipartisan, it's pretty easy, make enough noise, but in an organized way. Like I said, we have to be clear when we come to the Capitol on what we're speaking to, and show our numbers, writing our people, you know, emailing them, calling their offices and their staffers. So that's where we're at. And I feel like between the 2022 cycle that we've got in Georgia, the political cycle, and then heating up for 2024 presidential elections, we're in a good time to push hard. The families, we vote. Our loved ones can't vote. I get it, but we do. I can vote, and my lawmakers know who I am, and they're going to know more. So we'll continue to support and represent Schofield. You know, we're going to be all over. There's no crumbs. I'm sick of the crumbs.
Right. We don't deserve crumbs. You don't deserve crumbs. And again, why would not? You know, we took so long to try to get everything right is because I'm not going to settle for them just getting something to say they did something. Now, we're tired of that. You know, I'm not doing that. It would be a disservice to the people that are in this fight and have been impacted by these issues. So to say, oh, well, we're going to push a little bit and only get a little bit this year, and then we're going to come at, no.
Representative Mitchell, you've brought up something that I found very disturbing, because we're here in 2022, and you seem to indicate that there's almost what we used to call a chain gang system here in Georgia, where we have people in the prison system working, performing labor, and not being compensated fairly for it. Am I correct in that?
We do. We have lots of people in the prison system performing labor and not being compensated properly. Some not being compensated at all.
Georgia does not pay their inmates for labor.
Correct. So
And-
anything, yeah.
Now let's say that a county wants to have a 20-man detail. The average cost that they're going to pay for that detail for anywhere between 10 to 20 individuals is the Department of Corrections or the state is going to make $18,000 for the labor, which is very cheap when you have 20 individuals and you're only paying $18,000 for their labor. And then you have to pay the officer to supervise them, and the county is required to pay what the state pays that correctional officer. So either way, the counties and the cities that hire the inmate labor, they get away with cheap labor. And I agree, they should be compensated. They should be paid.
I got a question. You know, if you're riding through Podunk, Georgia somewhere, and they got a project that needs to be, taken care of down there, and they need some labor, and they need 10 people, they only have 9. So you riding through there and you run a traffic light, and you end up getting about 10 years in prison for running that traffic light. I know I'm being facetious, but my point is, you can get convicted of something that is no big deal, that can become a big deal if they need the extra labor.
Yeah.
That's scary. And I want to go back to something Ms. Boccia brought up, and I think it's a serious issue. She said something, the statement I think you made was that my loved ones can't vote. And I'm assuming that you're talking about people who have been in the system or now out of the system, who have criminal records and can't vote. And I know that in some states there is a movement to change that. Is there anything like that going on in here where incarcerated persons are allowed to vote?
Let me say that in Georgia now, you can vote once you have paid your debt to society. A person, they could re-register and they can vote. You can't do that. And some places, they still go to the jailhouse to register people to vote. And some people in jail doesn't vote, because you have to understand, everyone that is in jail have not been charged with crime. Some have not been found guilty of a crime, and so they still have their rights. So people are registered in jails, and people can really vote because they have not been found guilty of a crime. You know how they put people in jail and just have them sitting up in there. So you still have people to vote. And once a person have paid their debt, they can re-register to vote. So that is a lot of work been going on, trying to get ex-felons to re-register to vote once they have paid their debt to society. So that is where that is here in the state of Georgia, that they can't vote again.
Yeah, I just heard a horror story from Alabama about that, where a woman is a former felon, is now in prison because she was given some bad information and registered to vote. So that's how, you know, we get to change things, perhaps. And I say that just because of the comments that I've received, as I said earlier, from some persons who are not just family members of incarcerated persons, but some people who are actually currently incarcerated, and their concerns about humane treatment that former Warden Morales pointed out on an earlier program about even the quality of the food that they're given. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. Could you revisit that for us a little bit, Mr. Morales?
Sure. Inmates are required 3 meals a day, except on Saturday and Sunday, where they will only get 2 meals a day. The quality that they have been given is extremely poor. They're not getting the portions that they should be getting. And when you have no oversight of that kitchen and what they're producing and what they're cooking and what they're sending out, it is going to be a problem. The offenders are the ones that cook, and offenders have to be supervised. And sometimes when they're not supervised, they don't cook according to the menu. And so with that lack of oversight, some kitchens have been producing less poor quality meals for the inmates. When you have a kitchen staff that needs to be 6 or 7 to make sure that the meals get out properly, warm, enough calories according to the menu, but then you only have 1 or 2 that will show up, something is going to be affected. They're not going to be able to ensure that the quality of that food meets the minimum standard. And again, it goes back to that lack of staff. Now, there are some kitchens in our facilities that are producing good quality meals, but for the most part, they're getting the bottom. Their meat is byproduct. They're not getting good quality meal. They're getting potted meat, so to speak. They're not getting the real deal. They're getting substitutes. So the inmates or the offenders, they go hungry. And so they depend on the family to give them commissary money so that they can supplement their diet from the commissary, soups, honey buns, etc., which is poor diet. So they lose weight. So when the family members see them in visitation, they wonder what in the world is going on. You lost 40 pounds since I last seen you. So I can tell you that the quality of food must improve. It is horrible.
One thing I'd like to add here, it's disturbing, and I brought this up before, and I'll bring it up again. For those of you who don't know me, I am an advocate for, I'm a former police officer. I've been an advocate for police reforms even during my career and even now. And the one disturbing thing that bothers me is that people within the system, a person such as I, legislators have no interest in listening to us at all, who have been in the system and know how the system works and can give hands-on information on problems and impediments to progress. And I say that because we have a former prison warden here with us on this panel. How many times, sir, have you appeared before any legislative hearing about
Never.
anything concerning prison reform?
Never. The
And,
only
and
ones are the families and advocacy groups, but no politicians have ever contacted me for advice or suggestions or anything of the sort.
And see, the problem that we have with that is that what we have here is people with feelings of what they think is going on, and that can be up for debate by people who are working against reforms in the prison system. So they don't want to hear from people such as you.
Let me say
Yes.
this. I will say for me as an individual, you know, we put the bills out on this. The bills come up on the House website. That comes up on the House website. A lot of people contact us in regards to the bills that we put out. I can say I never, and I do criminal justice reform legislation all the time. And right now I have a group of kids. They be looking. A lot of people be looking for someone to come and talk. I know I've looked for, but we never get hearings on the bills that we do have. You know, we never get a hearing on the criminal justice reform legislation that we do have. So that's one thing about it. We don't get a hearing. All the time we get a hearing, it's when they take the bill and make it their own bill, then you will get a hearing about the bill. But they would have taken the bill and put their name on it and your name come off of it. So we don't really have that opportunity where we can have people to come down and testify on this criminal justice reform, on these criminal justice bills that we do have out there. Because I can say I have probably hundreds of them out there, about 100 bill dealing with criminal justice reform. I have more than many, and I know that it is good legislation, but then unless they take the bills, and that is what they do. But never heard of you all, but and I know you all because I have criminal justice reform legislation now that I have college students and high school students are trying to have hearings where people talk about it. You know, even if we just could find people where we could just have the conversation, get it out there to the public to talk about some of the legislations and the bills that we have brought forth, that would be a good segue. Just talking about it and having conversation. And that is something we don't do enough of is have conversations, just like we're having now, about legislation that matters for our people. We need to have more of these types of conversations so we can get people involved, so people will be able to hear what is going on, what type of legislation we do have that will benefit not just our people, but it'll benefit people all over the state of Georgia. So it is out there. We do have it. We just all need to work on getting it out to the public and getting the communications out there so that we all could be aware of what's going on and the legislation that we have out there.
Awesome. Miss Representative Mitchell, you have a comment in the chat room, but I think the public needs to hear what you were saying about Warden Morales.
Yeah, so we get anecdotes all the time as electeds, right? And we get videos and pictures that people have put on the internet that get shared with us. And it is, when we go to advocate, it's really hard without data, right? So when we see pictures of things on the internet and then Warden Morales explains what has happened, you can get a picture of how that picture happened, right? Of a lunch plate that doesn't have anything that one would deem as food on it. And I think, that closing this loop is really so important, right? Because we can't legislate as easily based on the anecdotes as we can based on, some type of consistent information. So talking to wardens is a great way to do that. Looking at things that actually quantify what is happening in the system is one of the ways that you can make changes that are irrefutable, right? If we know that every Saturday people are on average only getting one meal a day, if we could track that, then you can hold up the bill and say, this must change, here is the data. And so I think this is one of the areas where we really have an opportunity to legislate very thoughtfully in making sure that we listen to what is happening now and then saying, what is the way we track that in a non-anecdotal fashion? So we know every system has this problem, or, this would be legislation that would work to solve the specific problem. And that people can't say, no, that's not really happening. No, that's an exception. Because that is what happens, right? We prioritize problems based on how well we can quantify that they're real.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Morales, I'm looking forward to that invitation that you get to testify before legislature.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that there's been an increase in riots, or what they are now calling disturbances?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the inmates, when they're fed up with the food, the medical, the way that they're treated, the only way that they can respond in order to get somebody to listen to them is that they will riot. And they're not trying to escape, or they're not trying to harm anyone. They're just trying to legitimately improve their conditions of confinement. And when you don't listen, then the result is a riot. And then that's when they destroy property. That's when they injure fellow offenders or staff. And it only required for someone to listen to their legitimate needs. An offender doesn't ask much. They only ask for adequate medical, adequate health treatment, to be able to see and speak with their family members. And that's all they want. They want to do their time in a safe, clean environment. And when that clean environment is not provided, then the inmates will take matters into their own hands. And then that's when you see their conditions of the plumbing, the electrical. These inmates have cell phones, and they're going to let someone know when something is not going right, whether it be the condition of the food or their health or whatever. And they're going to take photos, and they're going to let people know. Where it's simple just to hear the inmates and listen to their legitimate needs.
That's why I brought this up at the beginning of the program, because as one who cherishes public safety and people in law enforcement, and that includes our corrections officers, it's a safety issue, and it's easily resolved if the people involved in policymaking begin to show that they're seriously concerned about improving or attempting to make improvements, or even listening. And that is a problem. And I hear this over and over again from people such as Ms. Boccia and others, that the one problem is getting people in power to listen
and communicate. Family members have every right to hear about the concerns of their incarcerated loved ones. The prison system has to have a way of communicating with the family, because they are extremely important. When these offenders get out, they're going to go back to family members. And if we shut the family member out and not use them to rehabilitate their loved ones, we're losing out on a very important tool. And most admin will give these family members the runaround. They send it to a deputy warden or they send it to a counselor. And it should be the warden who knows what's going on in his or her facility, and they should be the ones willing to discuss with the family member what's going on with Junior or Sally. Why should they get the runaround? And that's where that HB 1137 comes in, where we're going to hold people accountable. And one of that is you have to open lines of communication with the family members. And more often than not, they get shunned. They look at the family member as a problem. And it shouldn't be that way. We should be willing to talk to the family member because they have a stake in this as well. Their son, daughter, mother, father, sister, husband, or whatever.
Mhm.
So we're going to, go ahead, Ms. Boccia,
Real
please.
quick, I want to respond, and he's right. You know, the NIA is creating a project called If Moms Ran Prisons, because like Warden Morales says, if we ran a prison the way a family knows how to care for their loved one, what's wrong with them, what's right with them, what their needs are, and we're allowed to effectively communicate, we can start building and compiling some really important research recommendations to present to policymakers. We're working on that now, and I'll reach out to you, Representative Mitchell, about the project along with others. But it's, you know, you're right. If families are the number one most important piece of the puzzle, and if we don't allow the families to help rehabilitate and restore these men and women, we're never going to get anywhere. But I want to comment on that family piece.
And I'd like to just, as we get into the last portion of our program, just to give everyone an opportunity to make a statement before we close out. Representative Bruce, I'd like to start with you. And once again, I'd like to really thank you for joining this program and your input, sir.
I'm glad to do it. You know, this is a topic that probably needs even more discussion. And we need to come up with other solutions for how do we keep people out of jail in the first place. And, you know, we've got people that are incarcerated for, it's interesting, we got people that are incarcerated right now because of their sale of marijuana. But we've, as a country, put people in business growing marijuana. And so to me, I think that's one of the things we need to look at. I mean, I'm not an advocate for smoking that stuff, but I do believe that if we have found a reason for it to be legal, then there should not be anybody in prison because of it. So you have that and other issues too that I just think we need to revisit. And I thank you for putting this together. I think my colleagues are getting on with me too.
Thank you. I see we have Representative Scott back with us. If you'd like to make a closing comment. Or Representative Mitchell, either one.
Sure. It looks like they're stuck on mute still.
Okay.
So I think a closing comment from my perspective, looking into this system, is that we are trying to fix a whole lot of things at once, right? It's like if you're sitting in your house, the roof is on fire, your car doesn't work, the telephone wire is clipped, and your dog is missing. So you're trying to decide which of those things you deal with first and how you get the right responses to make those things happen. And I think the reason we are here is partially because of the disenfranchisement of folks who are in prison, right? Because their advocacy voices are much harder to get something accomplished. But what we haven't leveraged yet, and I think we're starting to see actually you folks do here, is the idea that we are all connected to someone who has been in prison, who has seen the system and who knows what needs to change. And all of us vote. And there are such a large number of Georgians who are invested in knowing if I care about someone who ends up in our state prison system, they need to be safe, they need to be fed, they need to be rehabilitated, they need to be able to call me. So there is space for voters to actually prioritize this and demand this from us as electeds. And I think that's what we're starting to see happen. And that's what we really need to happen in order to be able to address all the concurrent challenges that are there at the same time.
Thank you. Ms. Boccia, do you have any
Yeah,
closing comments?
Lots to say, but we don't have time. But I just want to thank again the representatives here that are lobbying our causes for our families, and we will be supporting your work. We'll be paying attention to your bills and be calling our people. And Warden Morales, you know, you and I are going to be working together because we have, you know, we have the two eyeballs outside of the wire and inside the wire, and we're watching. We know. Thank you.
And I'd like to add, please, you can contact the National Incarceration Association. They'd like your donations if possible. www.joinnia.com. That's www.joinnia.com. Mr. Morales, any closing comments?
Yes, I think in order to prioritize the issues, I think number one is to focus on the conditions of confinement. We have to look out for those who are incarcerated, and we need to treat them with dignity and respect. The other thing is transparency. When something goes wrong or goes awry, be honest about it. Tell the folks what happened. Communicate with family members. And lastly, our politicians must get involved. They're representing the family members, and they have to be educated on the prison system and how it works, and what we're doing with the incarcerated loved ones. How are we preparing them for re-entry back into society? All politicians need to know that.
Thank you, sir. And I did want to mention that Representative Mitchell has put her contact information at rebecca.mitchell@house.ga.gov for any questions or comments you have on this subject. That's rebecca.mitchell@house.ga.gov. As I close out, I have to mention this, and I know we're really up against the clock here. In preparation for this program and the prior program, and remember I talked about representatives in government listening. State Institutions and Property Committee of the Georgia State Senate. I sent emails to everyone on that committee. The only one who responded to me was Senator Sally Harrell, who has really indicated that she is interested in information about this project. The State Properties Committee, which is in the Georgia House of Representatives, I sent emails to everyone on that committee. Not one response, not one. I won't get into calling out all their names because we just don't have the time. But when I talk about people listening, paying attention, this is what I'm talking about. This is what this program is about. And when people who are in these policy-making positions not only don't listen, they don't think it's important to respond to even say, I'm sorry, but I'm going to be busy and I can't make that program. These are people that are these people who are incarcerated, those folks I just called out, these are people under their domain, people that they are responsible for. And when you ignore requests to engage in a conversation with me or with other legislators or community activists or former prison wardens, then you're telling me, you're telling the public that you don't care. And ladies and gentlemen, we cannot have that in government.
You know, that does not include all of us that got on here today.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all, which is why I commended all of you for being here. It's important that, and I'm telling you, you would be surprised who watches these broadcasts. You would absolutely be surprised. And I think that it's going to be heartening to many of our incarcerated persons, many of our families of incarcerated persons, and many of the citizens in our state and even our country, that you, all of you, have taken the time to listen and act. So I thank you all for your participation in this program. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been WCEG, the Worldwide Worldwide Community Empowerment Group. I am Norman A. Carter Jr. Again, I thank you, and I think that we're going to be revisiting this topic again. So I thank all of you for participating in this program. Have a good day.